Hey, welcome back to the Sleep Edit podcast. I'm Dr. Craig Kinapari.
And I'm Arielle Greenleaf.
So this is the podcast where we talk about children, sleep problems, sleep solutions. And since we're taping this late July, we thought it'd be a good time to talk about summer sleep issues and back to school sleep issues.
Yes. And we here in the Northeast tend to go back much later than the rest of the country. So I know that there are children getting ready for back to school in the next couple of weeks, which blows my mind.
Yeah, I think in the South, a lot of kids go back early August, maybe first or second week.
Yeah.
I think the reason is so that more kids are in air conditioning during the hottest part of the summer.
See, it's like different for us here because our schools aren't air conditioned. Yeah.
And the September can be pretty hot too. So, you know what? It's funny because in my world, I see this a lot, but mostly indirectly because teenagers will come to see me for other reasons, maybe sleep reasons, or sometimes even because I'm also a pulmonologist for asthma, but I always ask about sleep. And teenagers will often say, "Oh, I'm going to bed at 3 or 4 in the morning and sleeping all day." And, that can cause some significant issues, which we're going to get into. And I think certain other populations tend to struggle too with specifically autistic kids as well, have a lot more difficulty regulating their behaviors outside of the routines that they have during the school year. What sort of stuff do you see in the summertime?
I feel like people, even if they're traveling just on weekends or a week here, a week there, some people go away for the whole summer for a month. And then they come back. And even if they're not going to school, they're going to daycare or mom and dad are back to work after being on vacation. I definitely have an influx of clients at the end of August and through September because everyone's just trying to get back into routine, adjusting to the environment, adjusting the schedule, waking up earlier to get to daycare. I do find that people tend to struggle as the summer wraps up.
Yeah, and this is not to say that you need to be crazy in the summertime and super vigilant about your kids' sleep. Part of the fun of being a parent in the summertime is kicking back a little bit and letting things be a little bit more relaxed. But I still think parents should, even with older kids, provide some guidance around sleep. And for younger kids too, keeping routines intact as much as possible does tend to avoid that sort of September difficulty. I've always been interested in this topic, but the pandemic, where kids basically had a summer that was 6 or 8 months long. And what I mean by that is school closed, at least in the United States, in March. And for many kids, either in the fall, they were going back to hybrid programs like they did in our town, or in many cities like New Haven, where I work, kids were out of school through the first semester at least. Here were the sleep changes that we saw during the pandemic. One was a drastic increase in screen time. 2 was a later shift of bedtime and wake time across age groups. 3 was, interestingly, more nighttime sleep. 4 was less napping in young kids. And 5 was less sleep disturbance. And this is not a perfect analogy to what we see in the summertime. There are some parallels. When I was trying to understand this, I came across a research paper from 2007, which was actually looking at the increase in obesity in kids during the summer months, which is an interesting phenomenon. We always think of the summertime, perhaps thinking back to, for me, the 80s, summertime being much more active than the school year. But they coined this idea called the structured days hypothesis. And they said that during the school year, specifically the school week, kids had structured wake times. They had compulsory periods of physical activity, right? They had gym class, they had recess. They had restricted screen time during the day, right? Like no teacher would say, "Oh, you were being annoying. Here, have an iPad for 5 hours." And there are structured meal times. And many children I see who struggle with weight because weight overlaps a lot with respiratory and some sleep problems. Their parents will say their kids are hungry all the time. One of my colleagues, Rachel Goldberg-Gell, in the obesity clinic always says to parents, "Is your kid snacking incessantly in school?" And the answer is no. The teachers don't just say, "Oh, yeah, go to the closet and some Takis or chocolate chip." They're just like, no, the kids don't even ask because it's not an option.
Right.
Whereas in the summertime, if you're at home, it's very easy to go access snacks that aren't always nutritionally. And the authors say the changes that happen in the summer are a later shift in sleep and wake times,
Yep.
and more snacking and nutrition. Now, say what you will about school lunches. I don't remember them being super delicious, but there are at least some baseline nutritional standards that they have to meet. And a lot of research has shown that a later sleep time in children is associated with an increase in body mass index
Mm.
in obesity. There's this one study that's very interesting that looked at kids in a gifted program in Mississippi over the summer, kids 9 to 15, and there was a group with early sleep periods and a group with later sleep periods. And the early sleep period kids, their sleep was from 9:40 p.m. to 7:50 a.m. The later group was 1:45 a.m. to 10:45 a.m.
What age
So
group was this?
9 to 15.
Okay.
And the kids in the later school group were more likely to make poor dietary choices, consume more sugary caffeinated beverages, select other foods like high nutritional density, poor nutritional content. So these changes in the summertime can have a real effect on our children's health, even if, as a parent, the sleep is not causing us problems. The kids
Right.
aren't eating us up. The kids aren't being disruptive. Letting your child have free reign in the summertime can have significant health consequences.
Yeah.
And we were brainstorming what are the sort of factors that can affect sleep in the summer.
Yeah. I think for you often are dealing with school age children, and I'm mostly dealing with infants and toddlers. And certainly one of the things I saw, especially on social media this year, was there was a huge, I know I only saw the UK. There was a huge heat wave. And there's
Well,
not,
I was
oh, you were there. And there's not a lot of air conditioning over there. And so keeping children cool, and especially infants, which is essential for SIDS prevention, protection. And so keeping them cool is an important thing. But how do you keep them cool if you don't even have air conditioning? Things like that.
it is true in the context of climate change. We take air conditioning for granted in a lot of places in the States. And in Europe, that is not the case. 2 years ago, we were in Rome and we went to the Vatican, which is the home to many priceless works of art. And it is not climate controlled. The Sistine Chapel is lightly climate controlled, but I think it was probably about 80 degrees in there when I went
Oof.
in, which is pretty remarkable when you think of there's literally priceless works of art. And they're like,
Yeah.
what will be, will be.
They've survived this long.
But it is very clear that as the climate warms, and especially in the summertime, it has an effect on, and that's a safety issue in young infants,
Infants.
where we know elevated room temperatures are a SIDS risk factor.
Right. Do you have suggestions on how to help with that? Fans, obviously, keeping one of the things that I always recommend is keeping the shades drawn throughout the day so that the sun isn't coming through the windows and overheating the room even more.
And that's why so many European homes have shutters for that exact same
Right.
reason. I think personally, if you live in a really hot climate, I would recommend getting a window air conditioner if it is all possible for your baby. You dress them very lightly. Probably they can sleep in just a onesie or even just a diaper.
Yep.
They don't need a blanket, and just really pay attention to them. If it's dangerously hot, maybe go to a cooling center or to a friend's house where they have a cooler setting. Oh, you might even decamp to the basement to sleep.
Yeah.
But it can be hard to mitigate.
For infants and toddlers, their situations are pretty similar. Again, environment, being in a different place, which some children are great travelers, some are not. Mine was in the latter category. There are a lot of naps on the go. So instead of being in a crib, they're in a car or in a stroller as people are on vacation. People have to live their lives, right? You can't
Sure.
expect people to have 3 crib naps for their infant if they're on vacation. Those are some of the things that I find the most challenging. Also, being out, like you were talking about, being out of their typical routine. You might have a party in the evening, and so bedtime may be a little bit later. Some children, again, do well with that, some do not. Either way, when you're getting back, even if your child is adjusted to a later bedtime, you're coming back to get back on track. And that can cause some difficulty for some parents and families.
Yeah. And I think when we go by ages and kind of talk about the different sorts of strategies, because I think that they're going to look very different, like a baby
For
versus
sure.
a toddler.
Yes.
Um, And just to go to some of the other affect kids, right? The
Sure.
further north you are, the longer the days are.
Yes.
Uh, Famously, insomnia is endemic in Alaska in the summertime, where it's like a 20-hour day. Where we live in the Northeast, it's a little bit longer, and a lot of that's nice, right? Like you can, as a family, you can spend time outside in the evenings, much more than you can in the wintertime. It's not all bad, but it does change your routine.
So controlling that if you're able to, and I think most people are able to at least control it a little bit, but exposure to light, right? A lot of my clients are going to bed before the sun goes down, right?
It's tricky though, because like little kids are so light sensitive. It's like you can definitely see kids like getting up earlier in the mornings.
Yeah, my child, she's getting in that prepubescent time, and I can already see her sleep onset shifting later. And she's waking later in the morning, way later in the morning, but she was so sensitive to any light. So there could be a sliver of light coming in around a curtain and she'd be up at 5:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I find that now that she's 10, almost 11, the light doesn't bother her at all. So I agree that younger children, they see the light, they're up.
One hack that kind of worked for us when we were traveling, we were staying at a vacation house, and we tried to pull the kids a little bit, so the kids that got up younger were in the same room. Because it's fun for the cousins like having sleepovers anyway, in my
Sure.
experience, and that way at least you're not going to protect your own sleep particularly, but you can maybe protect the sleep of some of the kids who need a little bit more sleep.
Yeah.
I remember my aunt, my wife has a place on the beach, and we were staying there. And the younger kids, she had a walk-in closet without a window.
Yeah.
So like the really little kids, we put in there because it's
Yeah.
dark. And this is really going to vary depending on your situation where you're traveling. But sometimes changing where people sleep, shuffling who is sleeping with whom, and I'd say also recognizing that other families have different rules and routines than
100%.
you do. And if you're traveling, if you're really strict about electronics and the other family isn't, just to be aware that you kids are going to be asking you about
Mhm.
them. And I'm not going to mention by name the people in our lives who on vacation would let their child fall asleep in a pack and play with an iPad.
Oh,
You know who you
boy.
are. I think when we talk about teenagers, we can talk about things that are really sleep positive. Summer camp, summer
Mhm.
job, camping.
I think summer camp has been good for my daughter, but, like, waking her up at 6:30 this morning, she's wanna get up, but I'm like, "Dude, your bus is coming at 8 this fall because 'cause you're gonna be in middle school this year." Last year, for the past 5 years, it's been 9 AM, which is super late. She would have been fine going to school at 8 AM for the past 5 years, but now it would have been better for her to go at 9, but I know you're a huge advocate for later start times for older children too.
And looking ahead to middle schoolers and high school, it can be a real rough landing, prepare for, given how early school starts for a lot of those kids.
Yeah.
So I think we talked a little bit about infants already, specifically around the heat factors in travel. What other sort of tips do you have, like for your clients who have, babies less than a year of age, if they're traveling, or it's just the summertime in general?
I think we've talked about this on previous episodes about travel tips and tricks, but ultimately, there's only so much we can control. And if our babies and toddlers are out of their own environment, they may not sleep well. You may have to throw the rule book out in order to get the sleep that everyone needs. Obviously, try to control the environment. Dark, cool, quiet, safe. Try to keep them on schedule. Even if the nap is on the go, try to keep it within a normal time frame so that your kid isn't like melting down by the time you're trying to give them a nap. Just keeping them well rested, but also just trying to have fun and let go a little bit. Because I think parents can get so scared to even travel because they don't want to get out of their routine because they have literal PTSD from when their children were poor sleepers. So it can be scary, but if you can try to remember that your children now, you can get back on track when you're home, that can be freeing.
You got to have a balance, right? Because the fact is, I know a lot of the our favorite stories in our family about vacations, or sometimes we go wrong. And in the
Mhm.
moment, it's stressful. It's kind of funny
Right.
uh, uh, in retrospect. And you can't manage everything. Sometimes your kid's going to have a tantrum when you're traveling. It's fine.
Mm.
Everybody has been there. And I guarantee you, any adult in the vicinity who has been a parent at some point is just grateful that
It's
it's not
not
their
their
kid.
own child.
Uh,
But
um,
also having empathy. Don't feel bad if you're out there and your toddler's having a tantrum at the beach. If you're surrounded by parents, we've all experienced it, and glad it's not my child. But at the same time, I have so much empathy and sympathy and grace for those parents that are going through that while their child. And the thing is, for me, as I always say, also in addition to sleep, is make sure you're feeding them regularly. Like you said, feeding schedules can get thrown off, and children can get very hangry. They can get, and as long as your child is well fed and you're keeping them well rested on some sort of a schedule, you should be okay.
Yeah, it's like if your kid's being really difficult, they're probably either angry or leaving is not going to be great.
Right.
And I'd say for toddlers, the rule kind of the same. You maybe have toddlers are a little bit less adaptable than infants.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, and they're gonna. There's this idea we've talked about the forbidden zone in the evening. You really have two windows where your kid's going to fall asleep.
Hmm.
So your kid misses their bedtime. They might be really active and sort of wide awake. I don't think you have to push it if they're acting crazy and they're running around and having fun with their cousins or whatever. Just recognize there may be a little bit of a consequence to, but that's okay. 'Cause vacationing as a parent is not like vacation before you have a parent. And I remember it being a rude awakening on our first trip away with Charlie, being like, "Oh, I can't just hang out by the pool and drink beer and read a book. Like I actually am not sitting down."
That's why I don't call
Um,
them vacations.
the article on my blog about is vacation quote sleep, which I was probably terrible for SEO, but
Yeah.
that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So you're less likely to be disappointed.
Absolutely. It's difficult though. If you're a type A parent, and I work with a lot of type A parents, it's very difficult to let go and then to handle if things get crazy while you're away.
And there's also the people who you see a lot of who have struggled with their kids' sleep. They've and they're reluctant to deviate from their routine.
Absolutely.
Tricky. I'm not going to lie. I see sometimes parents come in. Oh, my kid's sleep was going great, and then we went on vacation, and I brought her into bed with me, and now she has slept in my bed for 3 years.
Yes, that's very common.
And that is true in our world. That doesn't mean it's the majority of kids where that will happen.
It's what I see. If it's not
Yeah.
causing problems, I'm not going to see it.
I think if you've got an older child, say a preschool or a school age kid, and you're making some deviations from the routine like bed sharing, it's worth saying, oh, this is what a fun sleepover we're going to have here. This isn't what we do at home,
Right.
but we're going to share the same room.
Right.
Maybe you're going to be in bed with one parent and your brother will be in bed with the other parent. And what a fun treat for us to do. This is not how we're going to normally
Right.
do. And that is, I think, a good conversation. I can say for us, when we go on vacation, we usually share a room with our kids because we're not billionaire. Everybody's got to be a little more flexible.
Yes.
The struggles are different when you have teenagers, like
Sure.
specifically around kids spending a lot of time in the bathroom or taking very long showers
Yeah.
when we're all trying. But that's part of the fun of it too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into school age kids. 'Cause I got to say, this is something I deal with probably more than you do. And I see
Yeah.
these are the kids to tend to have more problems. In general, infants and toddlers are not going to shift their schedule super late. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is most of them biologically, they're early risers. And we tend to have stricter rules for little kids, like kids who are sleeping in cribs, kids who are sleeping in toddler beds, than we do for school age kids. And I will say kids that really need their routines, like children with autism who tend to thrive with set routines, can have a real difficult time in the summer. Many special needs kids will go to school year round. They'll go to summer school or summer
Yeah.
programs, but there still are gaps of at least 2 to 3 weeks at the beginning of the off. And families in this context can really dread this because it means that everything gets off. Behaviors get off, diet gets off, sleep gets extremely disrupted.
Mhm.
And when I say to families, this is hard, is to try to replicate their schedule as much as possible and really make sure they're active during the day. And the fact is, as a parent, you really can provide as much stimulation as school. They're interacting with many different people. You can't perfectly replicate that degree of stimulation and that degree of activity. But taking your kid to the park on a set routine, going to a playground, if there is an appropriate summer program, your special needs child, it can be very helpful. It is a challenging time for many special needs kids. The flip side is I've seen many kids in this situation they're struggling, and they're like age 4.5. They start kindergarten, and all of a sudden things get a lot better.
Yeah, sure. Structured environment.
It's a finite period of time. Parents, if you're struggling, if you can find anyone to help you, get any respite care from other family members, it can be difficult.
Yeah.
In general, I think it's important for kids school age. I think through ages 12 or 14, you still have to have a bedtime for your kids. And it doesn't have to be the same bedtime, but I would not recommend, say, having your 8-year-old have no bedtime, which I see very frequently in the summertime.
Yeah.
That there's this vibe, well, you don't have anything you got to do tomorrow, just do whatever you want. And if there are teenagers in the house, the little kids will want to be on that schedule.
Yeah.
I think it's still good to have a bedtime. My recommendation is if your kid is not in puberty yet, usually shifting the schedule about an hour later is a pretty safe bet. For kids in puberty, we'll get to like teenagers and preteens. 2 hours, I think, is fine and much more realistic. And maybe on special nights even later. But like on an average night, I'd say, if they go to bed at 9 o'clock in the school week, have them go to bed 10. Or if they're if they're like a 11 or 12-year-old, like 11 at the latest. It's just, you don't want to have to unroll this at the end of this. Because I guarantee you, your child is not doing enriching activities. They're probably on screen.
Yeah.
One excuse that has never carried water in my house and doesn't for my patients either is what other kids are doing.
Yeah. Right.
Just because your 10-year-old's friend is up all night on Snapchat or something does not mean that your child gets to do that. I also would strongly recommend that you have the same screen time rules in the summer as you do during the school year, so that your kids' devices don't live in their room at night.
Right.
That can be hard to reinforce with teenagers who go to bed later than you do.
Sure.
I'd say for teens, I kind of take a different tack. I think teenagers need to have some autonomy. And if you're trying to manage their bedtime, they may not be working and you're working, is a battle, but trying to set a wake time mutually agreed upon is a good idea. Again, there's the perfect world and there's the real world. And the real world, maybe their wake time is a little bit later than you like, but your child can commit to it and it's not going to be a battle.
Right.
This is why summer activities are so important for older kids. I can tell you, like, summer camp is like magic for my kids with sleep issues, because especially sleepaway camp, if they go away, the rules of camp are much more inflexible. Most summer camps, they're not necessarily letting them have their devices, or at least they have rules around them, and the kids are very busy during the day.
Usually, they're usually outside.
I did computer camp.
All right.
I actually was too nerdy to go sleepaway camp. I was too much of a fraidy kid.
So you were on screens all day.
I was on like a monochrome monitor running programs in BASIC that would say my name.
So you were using your brain.
I was using my brain, my weak little nerd body to carry books around and stuff.
Funny.
Summer jobs are helpful. Sort of like real magical reset. Isn't that as camping? There's actually a couple of articles looking at camping for teenagers that have really severe delayed sleep phase. When we say delayed sleep phase, that means their natural sleep periods have shifted significantly later than they need to be for their lives. So imagine a kid who's sleeping from 3 to noon every day. During the pandemic, when we had this longer period, I saw many teenagers who were up all night and sleeping all day. And there wasn't much we could do about it, because if everybody's doing it, is it a problem or does it just reflect the circumstances?
I'm laughing because that was me when I was a teenager. I was totally like up late and sleeping till noon. And now I'm like lucky if I can sleep till 8 a.m.
So that's your child will ruin your sleep. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Years of waking up in the 5 and 6 a.m.
You become a obligate morning person.
Me laugh because I'm up now earlier than my child, which just blows my mind.
I'm the person that gets everybody up in our house.
Yeah.
But anyway, going back to the camping thing, they took kids with these sleep schedules on a camping trip. They did not have them bring their screens. And over 4 days, they totally reset
Yeah.
to going to bed not too late and getting close to dawn.
Was that from
Like it was from, I think they were thinking it was largely the technical term would be entrainment, having the only light exposures being natural light
right,
exposures. But also, I'm sure they weren't just sitting around the
right,
listening to them complain about the fact they didn't have their phones.
right.
But, so I'd say if you have a teenager that's really shifted late and your family likes to do something like this, if you plan a trip like this at the end of the summer, it actually might be very helpful. Another thing that comes up, because I care for a wide range from various socioeconomic backgrounds, but I do care for a fair amount of affluent families. And if you are traveling east, that will also help set your schedule earlier.
Mm,
So on the East Coast, if you're going to Europe, or if you're on the West Coast, you're coming to the East Coast. It'll take about 1 day of jet lag to fully set your schedule. If you come back right into the school year, your kid will have an easier time getting up early.
mm.
Again, not your insurance is going to pay for a trip to Europe, but if you were planning on it anyway and you had concerns about this, doing it at the end of the summer may be helpful.
Yeah, I'm gonna let my boss know that because they live in California, and she was telling me that they're gonna be on the East Coast for vacation, and then the next week the kids go back to school. So that's actually gonna benefit everybody.
It's perfect. I'd say the big themes for me would be let's do round robin. Like, what are the things you'd say to parents in general what to do this summer? For me, number one, keep a routine. Doesn't have to be exactly the week as the school year routine. For most kids, have a set bedtime. I'd say for ages 12 to 14 and up, have a set wake time. What's a good one for you?
Okay. So for going on vacation, like you were saying before, my clients come to me in desperation. I don't have people coming to me with easy children or,
Sure.
children that were great sleepers.
Sleepers.
You know what I'm saying? They become easier once they do sleep. Going away, I just really try to impress upon parents, keep them well rested. Try to stick to a similar schedule within half an hour of what you normally are seeing. Little infants are much easier. If they're sleep trained and they're on a real schedule, they can be pretty rigid. Try to keep the schedule within 30 to 60 minutes. Even if it's on the go, that's fine. Car naps, stroller naps, keep bedtime at a reasonable hour. If it's going to be a later bedtime, add another little 30-minute stroller nap for an infant. And for toddlers, usually the toddlers are on one nap. So if you can prioritize that nap, go to the beach in the morning, come home, have lunch, nap time, go back to the beach, something like that.
Yep.
That can help immensely as well.
Skip the hottest time of the day.
Ultimately, people are scared because they have dealt with children that haven't slept, and it's been recent, right? They've finally gotten them to a good place. So I try to just let them know your kids have the skills to sleep well. Try to remember that. Do get back on schedule. And when you get back on schedule, I talk about the controlled wake up, what you were saying. Controlling that wake up time will then help naps fall into the right timing and then bedtime fall into the right timing. And it may take a little bit to adjust, but within a couple of days, babies and toddlers can pretty quickly adjust back to. What I would say, if you fell into bad habits, try to eliminate that as soon as possible when you get back. It can be tricky and your child might protest, but it shouldn't take more than a day or two to get back.
I think that's really good advice. If you have achieved good sleep, you will be able to achieve it again.
Exactly.
And often, parents come back to me, they're like, my kid was sleeping well, and then they're not. And they're like, I don't know what happened. And then you start asking them, and they're like, yeah, bedtime slipped a little bit later. And
Yeah.
I started staying with him when he falls asleep again. And be like,
There you
one thing I would do in the summertime, there's a lot of evidence that kids actually, without routines, get a little bit less sleep than they do during the school year, which is the opposite of what we think. Like, oh, the summers are chill. If the kids are staying up super late, even if they're shifting their wake time later, just think about what happens. The room is getting bright. It's getting hotter. They're getting less sleep. So I would say that to parents, it's okay for the schedule to slide a little bit, but you still have to pay attention to make sure your child's getting enough sleep.
Absolutely.
And the best barometer of that on most kids is if you have to wake them up in the morning, they're
Mhm.
probably not getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
And I won't say the teenagers lie, but they may shade the truth if you ask them when they went to sleep. There's a cool hack somebody showed, at least on the iPhone, where you can look at the battery consumption on someone's phone
Oh,
and see when they stopped using it. So if you actually wanna ask your kid, like, they're like, "Oh, I went to bed then," and be like, "Oh, let me just." I guess this should be agreed upon in advance that you're able to look at your kid's phone, with their permission. You can actually see when they stopped looking at it the night before, like
parental
when the screen went off.
controls. If you have parental controls set up on an iPhone, my daughter has an iPad, and I have access from my phone to see even how long she spent on any given thing, like YouTube.
Sure.
She doesn't have social media, so I can see how long she was on there for and when she started and stopped using it.
I would say the ultimate parental control at night is having possession of your child's devices.
Oh, for sure.
I am skeptical of any parent who says that software is keeping their child from accessing their device at night if it's in their room.
It's
I
not
just
allowed in her room at night.
um,
Yeah.
do you use just Apple stuff or use like Life 360 or something?
I'm not at the point of Life 360. I'm learning about it, so I just use the Apple whatever it is on there. It shows you screen time
No,
and things. But eventually, I will be putting other things on there.
that's what we use now. I just didn't feel like surveilling them that
Right.
closely, but every family makes different decisions.
Sure.
So I think we should close by talking about what do you do if it is shifted a lot later? This is incredibly common for me to see teenagers come in and they've shifted their schedule much later. So here's what I usually recommend. I think for most kids, plan on for at least 4 or 5 days before the beginning of the school year, getting them up at 8 in the morning, taking them out for a walk in the sunshine.
Mhm.
That's all you really need to do. You don't need to make some big production about this. But I would say for kids that are consistently sleeping very late, and I'd say very late is more than 4 or 5 hours later
Mm.
than they have to wake up for school.
Mhm.
So I have to get up at 6 in the morning for school, which is a common wake time in the US for
Yeah.
teenagers. They're gonna have a real hard time when school starts if you don't make some plans.
Mhm.
And I have a couple of recommendations in that. And the first is actually you've got to talk with your child about this issue. If you're trying to roll out some changes and they don't understand why or aren't on board, it's just going to create a lot of conflict. So I would talk to your kid, may be thinking about this and be like, "Hey, I noticed you've been sleeping pretty late. You're starting school in a couple of weeks. That's going to be pretty rough. I think that might be pretty rough for you." And just talk to them a little bit about it. For kids that are really shifted later, you can move their wake time earlier gradually. You can do that pretty easily, pretty painlessly, about 10 to 15 minutes per day. And you gotta get them on board with this. Getting up 15 minutes earlier a day is a lot easier than, "Well, you've been getting up at noon, now I just want you to start getting up at 8 in the morning." Bedtime is gonna adjust if you start moving that earlier. I think it's worth also talking with them about if the screen time rules are different in your home during the summertime. Having morning light exposure can be helpful. Opening the blinds in the room, before your teenager wakes up can help entrain them earlier. Where this gets really tricky is if you have a kid that's quite late shifted, like they're sleeping all day. Sometimes that morning light exposure can actually have the opposite effect because it's early in their circadian day. Like imagine you have a kid that's sleeping from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. The strongest effect for wake time for sunlight is about an hour before you're naturally waking up. And if you're on the other side of that, the light can move things the wrong way.
It's like shift work.
Yeah, well, which is a real complicated
Right.
topic. But yeah, I'd say opening the blinds an hour or two before when they're naturally waking would be the safe thing to do. Um, and I'd say if this is causing a lot of conflict in your house or you're really worried about it, it would be worth taking to your child's pediatrician.
Mhm.
Sometimes having another adult who is not you talk about why this is important can break through in a way that the fact is we all know even when I don't want to get content warning here. I was going to say a craphead teen. I would recognize that my parents would be right about stuff, but if they told me stuff, I still wouldn't want to do it because if they were my parents
Right.
and it was lame to listen to them.
Yep.
But if another adult I trusted, like my pediatrician said the same thing, being like, okay, they're probably right about this.
Right.
I think involving your child's healthcare provider, and really this is the time to start thinking about if your kid's going back to school in a couple of weeks. If hopefully we'll get you episode out pretty quickly, or even it's a month from. Just sort of thinking about these things set your child up for success when the
Mhm.
school year starts.
Yeah.
If your child is sleep deprived for the first week of school, when they're making first impressions on their new teachers, kind of learning how the school year works.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that I run into many issues with infants and toddlers of a shift in schedule that drastic.
Yeah.
They've had to do something to assist their child to sleep, and then now they want to undo that when they get home. The controlled wake up is helpful if the child has started sleeping later than maybe you would be leaving for daycare. I don't see that schedules have shifted by hours much. So,
Yeah. The schedule stuff I feel like is pretty easy in little kids. Bias to getting up in the morning.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's more putting the routine back together.
Exactly.
And that can happen gradually. Like if you're like, oh, you had such a I would close with too, for me personally, if you make some changes over the summer where things are relaxed and things are still going well, that's okay.
After anything if it's working for your lifestyle.
Like sometimes people have this guilt about like, oh, I started falling asleep with my kid at bedtime, or staying with my kid till they fall asleep. They're like, well, do they wake up at night or are they sleeping well? They're like, oh, they're sleeping great. I'm like,
Does it bother if it's disrupting sleep for everybody?
it's funny in the big Bible of sleep disorders. It's called the International Classification of Sleep Disorder. Chronic insomnia is defined as 3 months of sleep problems. So for adult insomnia, it's like being unsatisfied with your sleep is one of the criteria. For chronic insomnia kids, is if the parent is unsatisfied with the sleep. So really, parental satisfaction is a big dimension of
It's
this.
relative.
If-
It's
yeah,
all subjective.
yeah. So listen, that's all I got today. Ariel, you always have to remind me where people can find us.
Editpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and we'll have links for stuff we talked about in the show notes, and I think the next episode we're going to be talking on
Yeah,
that.
I'm excited about that one. That is a big one for when people are coming back from vacation.
Man, the struggle is real. My older one was a terrible napper until he was like a year and a half. And then he
Yeah,
was great.
it's rough.
Okay, hope everyone's having a good summer, and thanks for listening.
See you next time.